Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure from our part. You have
It's
such a-
very, very sweet of you, very kind of you, yeah, to have me on your platform. And Himanshi,
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. Good morning.
hi, good morning, Himanshi. So just let me know when you want me to start.
Ma'am,
Uh,
we'll start in 2 minutes. Intaz is there. We are
and
all
you
there.
can introduce me to everyone.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, those who don't know me, I'm Molly Kaushal. I'm currently now I have a long association with folklore. Uh, I think since 91, when we used to have this Ford Foundation,
Yeah.
and most of your colleagues have been very, very, very dear friends of mine. Mm, And then I was from JNU, I shifted to Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts. And now I'm in Ahmedabad and I'm heading a center on heritage management. Yeah. So that's briefly my introduction.
Ma'am, we heard you many times on different platforms.
Okay.
I know you from long back because I was a student of Sudhakar from 92.
Yes.
So,
I remember the center being opened at the Hyderabad University.
you
It
know,
was, I think, one of the very first ones that
yeah.
came about.
Mm.
Ford Foundation was very active at that time.
Yeah.
And we all attended a lot of workshops and conferences together. Yeah.
I know. You're also part of NFSC
NFSC, yes, I'm also part of NFSC. True, true.
for a lot of time. Now things like now CFSR is taking the mantle and they have reached so many people.
Uh-huh.
Many people, yeah. Imtiaz Ali and team is doing a good job. So if they
So
continue,
Imtiaz is from Center for Folklore Studies and Research, or from
yeah, he's from Center for Folklore Studies and Research. He's basically working in Subhash Chandra Bose University.
Okay.
That is Subhash University. Yeah, he's there. He will introduce.
Yes, please introduce.
Yeah.
Actually, I was also a student of University of Hyderabad
Okay.
during uh, 2011 to 2018. And then I shifted to Jadavpur University for postdoctoral fellow, and then I joined at Netaji Subhas Open University.
Okay.
And then we thought of making a center, independent center, with our friends like Rusha and another team from Delhi and Assam, from different people. And we have realized that most of the old institute or center are not active.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll try to make them active. Even Hyderabad University Center is also very active now after
Yeah.
a long decade. And we are like,
Absolutely. Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
and we are working like we are very active now, and we have more than 6,000 people all over the globe, like in our database. And we are offering different kinds of courses, short-term courses, and also we are making documentary movies with our own fund.
Oh,
It's not
wonderful.
funded by, like Ford Foundation has a lot of funds, but we don't have funds. But without funds, we are doing everything.
That's what is the challenge, isn't it? That's the challenge, really. Yeah.
So I request Himanshi and Nimisha, both of them are there. Himanshi to take care of this session. Himanshi, we'll start. Imtiaz, we'll start.
Yes, sir.
So
No,
we should,
Himanshi can start, no?
yeah, Himanshi will start. Yes.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Today, on our second day of our conference, Folklore Matters, exploring rituals, gender, and global traditions, we are here from the Center for Folk Culture Studies, University of Hyderabad, and the team Center for Folk Studies and Research, Kolkata, West Bengal, welcome you all to celebrate World Folklore Day 2005. Both the leading public and private research institutes are collaborating to bring forward the critical and practical knowledge on folklore as an essential human expression and and as an interdisciplinary study. The will to celebrate the World Folklore Day through a hybrid mode conference brings us a platform to exchange ideas, methodologies, theories, and expressions and experiences as a community who read and perform folklore. Professor Jolly describes the need to celebrate as a dedicated day to aware and proliferate ideas,
Wonderful.
source of our studying and performing folklore beyond its everyday practice. Yesterday's event included the photo exhibition Rituals in the Ordinary by Viresh Gopinathan, a photographer and documentarist, followed by a slideshow and a talk by the artist on framing the sacred. The afternoon session hosted several presentations by 7 research scholars on different topics of fieldwork, exploring methodology, describing folk practices, and critical discourse in the folk culture studies. Today, we have a panel discussion with 8 presenters and a followed question-answer session. We have today with us Professor Molly Kaushal, Professor and Director at Center for Heritage Management, Ahmedabad University. I welcome you, ma'am, and we are honored to have you here. Professor Molly Kaushal is a pioneer in the field, a folklorist by training, a researcher, a documentarist, project head, a curator, a facilitator in her long career spanning for more than 30 years. As a former professor and head of Janpada Sampada Division at Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, New Delhi, IGNCA, she has headed several projects documenting, researching, and archiving folk materials from across the country. Few of her important works are Evolving Methodologies for Community-Based Inventorying of IHCH, a case study of Gujarat among the Maldharis of Bani region, Gujarat with UNESCO, research on living traditions of Ramayana and Mahabharata, exhibitions on puppetry, paintings, and printed reports on especially Sanji ancestral spaces, maiden desires, which has personally helped me a lot for my research during my PhD. I welcome you, ma'am, here for our event, and I open the session with a keynote speech from you for your elucidating words and knowledge on the subject matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Himanshi. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Professor Puthusari, once again. And it's a great pleasure to be here celebrating the Folklore Day. And I gave it some thought and was wondering what really was the burning issue in front of folklore studies, why they've been so lying so low. Why has all of a sudden folklore being, equated with the heritage now? Yeah, it's earlier, to some extent, it was used simultaneously. We continue to use simultaneously, but we can see that heritage has won the war of naming. A discipline. So I have actually, I've given a title to my talk, which is Global Discourses on Folklore and Intangible Cultural Heritage and its implications for folklore studies. Because all of you are young scholars, deeply passionate about your field of study, about the subject matter. And I think these are some of the burning questions that we have in front of us. And normally, or unless I'm really totally unaware, on folklore study conferences, platforms, we do not raise the issue of how folklore became intangible cultural heritage. And it has huge implications for the field. A lot of great scholars of our time of folklore who prided themselves in calling themselves folklorists actually began to advocate the term intangible cultural heritage over folklore. Some of them even spelled death to folklore. Many centers of learning, including the famous Pennsylvania Center of Folklore, shut down and reincarnated as Center for Heritage Management. Yeah. So there are various issues why this happened, and is it just a shift of names? You all remember two titles probably very well. One from Shakespeare, What is in a Name? The rose smells as sweet, would smell as sweet as in any other. And also the great semiotician Umberto Eco, who said The Rose is the Name. It's a detective novel, but it is actually a lot of take on semiotics. And so I thought that probably on this platform, and particularly a platform that is celebrating the Folklore Day, I should bring in this whole debate that has happened and the global regimes that we have now, particularly as UNESCO, which has this convention of 2003, convention on safeguarding of whatever intangible cultural protection of convention on intangible cultural heritage. The convention has a long history and it did not straight away start with this heritage tag or intangible heritage tag at least. And I'm going to go into that history very briefly because it really like begins somewhere in the 1972 when the first convention, it's now called 1972 World Heritage Convention, which was to protect cultural heritage. And I'll just tell you what it meant by cultural heritage. And that has its own history of Europe, coming to terms with its own cultural history, which was available in forms of buildings and monuments and sites. And so it was called Convention for the Protection of Cultural Heritage and Cultural and Natural Heritage. Yeah. Now, this convention really had nothing intangible about it. Okay. And the word intangible heritage is in many ways is a neologism, yeah, which didn't as such, the intangible and the heritage came together at a certain point in the history of this whole discourse on folklore. So I'm going to go very briefly into it, but before, now what are we talking about? We are talking about naming things, yeah? And when we name things, it's always it's an epistemological act. Yeah, there is a felt need for a paradigm shift in the way that we look at our subject matter. And it's also political. Yeah, so naming is political. That is one thing that we really have to understand. And who can understand it better than an Indian? Because everyday city names are being changed, yeah? Without really changing, but the paradigm shift happens in how we relate to other people, how we relate to the other. And something similar is also happening in this whole discourse on folklore of of the 70s and the 90s, when actually the discipline was being propagated in India with a lot of zeal. It was also the time when the folklore studies were at the top. of hierarchy of disciplines, whether it was anthropology, whether it was economics, whatever studies you mentioned, geography, sacred geographies. Folklore was at the heart of, all these debates. And there were many institutions coming up all across the world that would study folklore, collect folklore, document folklore. And before I move little further, I want to bring in a name which you are all very well familiar with, is Dan Benamos. And he gets also into this debate about folklore and intangible cultural heritage, and is one of those few scholars who has actually defended folklore as against its, transformation into intangible cultural heritage. And this is a very beautiful quote that I'm taking from one of his articles, where he says names are not free-floating air-filled balloons, yeah, nor are they shingles that hang above office or storehouse. Rather, they are meaningful paradigms of knowledge, culture, ideas with history, experiences with their respective symbolic identities. Yeah. So in a way, then when you're shifting from folklore to heritage, you are actually doing away with all that history of folklore. We also understand as folklorists and historians of folklore studies that folklore has had issues, yeah? It is not as if its history has always been very smooth or has been non-political or non-partisan. It is not true, because we have the case of, say, when actually before anything gets named, there is an object that exists, yeah? So the song existed, whether it was called traditional populaire or antiquities, before Herder came into picture and gave it the names of Volkskund, or whether it was your William Thoms who called antiquities as folklore. And the resistance by, other Europeans, especially France, which still doesn't use the word folklore. Yeah, and tradition populaire or whatever, they have their popular traditions, and popular culture is what they use. Even when this 2000, the recommendations, I'll come to that later. But there was, in this journey from folklore to intangible cultural heritage, another document by UNESCO, which was called Recommendations on Safeguarding of Traditional Cultures and Folklore. And France, because conventions are first drafted in French, refused to name it folklore and remain with some traditional popular culture kind of a thing. So, right in the beginning, that we can see that there is this tension of what that song should be named, yeah, or what that story should be named, what that performance should be named. And while communities have their own nomenclature, their own categories, under the influence of this knowledge industry, yeah, and under the influence of global regimes, especially that came into force after the World War I, yeah, and more so after Second World War. You know that House of Leagues, what was it called? House of whatever, became United Nations, and then it added several wings, and UNESCO plays a major role in the field of culture and its protection and its safeguarding. This is the regime of the contemporary world now, yeah. Previously, there was another regime which we call the colonial powers, yeah, that turned a large part of this world into its colony and impose its own methodologies, own knowledge production strategies, sites. They threw it into Africa, into India, into Latin America, you name, and everywhere. The whole Asia and Africa underwent massive cultural paradigm shift in the ways that they must have looked at their cultures and how they were asked to, and how they began to look at this. So even, when initially it's also another interesting thing that, when all the safeguarding of folklore was happening, United Kingdom was not happy. Yeah, and it was neither happy with intangible cultural heritage, and it didn't join the treaty till 2024. I think it became, it ratified the treaty only last year. Okay, we'll come back to that also. So just building up a little historiography of our discipline, which is today become intangible cultural heritage, is that it was very much politically steeped. It was regulated. And it was regulated not by the communities or the nation itself in the first place, but a supranational regime called UNESCO, which now controlled all these 183 nation states who became party to it, that how should they look at their culture. Yeah. So no decolonizing is happening here. Earlier, the British told you how to look at your culture, and they were too one trapped in terms of that we were not good enough, and another, of course, we had a great past, but then we lost it all, and we're still not good enough. Yeah, you all remember the college saying that the entire literary achievements of India are not even equal to a bookshelf of a British library. So with that kind of attitudes, these disciplines of anthropology, ethnology, ethnography, folklore make entry into the colony, yeah, that we were, and rest of the colonies in the world that there were. But why did Britain not focus on folklore in the beginning in its own kingdom? And it said that no, we are a very civilized nation. We are an empire with great history. So we don't have folklore. The folklore is something that the colony has. Okay, so their case was turned towards the colony, which was very different from what Herder was doing, for example, or what other European countries were doing, was that they were looking behind their own backyards, okay, to look for these relics and survivals of a great past. Why the history became more and more troubled was when folklore, and I know that you're all aware of that history. Why I'm getting into this history? Because it played a very crucial role when the tag of folklore was dropped from UNESCO and a new tag of intangible cultural heritage was there. So this little remembrance, I think, is necessary. So when the Romanticists, after the Industrial Revolution, And of course, early 1930s, 34, you all know that nationalism became the spirit of the nation. Yeah, and so folklore was the spirit of the nation, and music and dance and song, they were the essence of the nation. Literally, then getting translated of purity of races, and leading to war and Holocaust. And it's a different matter that the same people are today, doing worse things to Gaza than what probably happened to them. So, like, I think Israel has come a full circle in that sense. But leaving that aside, I come back to this now. So this is a brief history. Then also the history of Soviet Union, that how folklore began to be not discovered but fabricated. Yeah, so there was modern contemporary folklore, contemporary man. It is the proletariat, the true spirit of the nation. And so the bogey was the same, the line of thought was the same. But if herders and others were discovering, or Grimms were discovering folklore in their backyard, mm, Soviet Union was fabricating it in their front yard, yeah, courtyard, so to speak. Not that actually Russian academia played a great role in consolidation of folklore studies, and even before the Soviet Union. So if one nation, one regime, we can say that was seriously engaged with the study of folklore and communities and people, and definitely was Russia, at the Russian Empire, for example. But was not in favor of the common man. The Russian Empire threw up some wonderful dictators, who decided overnight nobody will have beard in this country. So the farmers were asked to, be clean shaven. Nobody would speak Russian. They all speak French. So it had its own issues and how they related to people, to communities, how they related to what they spoke, what they ate, where they lived. Yeah. But credit also goes to them for bringing the folklore and folk life together as one. While in Europe, folklore was purely oral traditions and folk life was the material culture, what we today parade as intangible heritage and built heritage, if you want to call static heritage. I don't know. Cultural heritage is now not exclusive to the domain of built heritage. Um, so when Europe began, these debates began right in the 18th century of great empires, great nation states with great past, and having this huge, heritage of the monuments, buildings, as I said. And finally, the whole preservation effort was very much oriented towards commerce. It was not so much the preservation and restoration, but preservation and restoration of these buildings was to create tourist spots out of it and benefit the revenue of these nation states. So right from the beginning, the idea of this great heritage was very, very commodity and profit and economic oriented. In all these debates in the 50s and the 60s lead to the convention, declaration of a convention, adoption of a convention on cultural and natural heritage. The word appears intangible, in a very intangible way, in this whole document, and really didn't have a role to play, and nobody even noticed it. So after a while, and that is also very important when we'll come to the debate, and you must keep track of time, because if I'm exceeding time limits, I can be brief. But since
Yeah,
you're
Himanshi will come in, man. Don't worry. Himanshi will come in.
yeah, all right.
Okay, go on. Go on.
So when this heritage business begins to happen in 1970, and what does this convention comes up with finally, as you know, the idea of protection is a World Heritage List. Okay, so who do you think would figure prominently on this list? Obviously, nation states, economically powerful states, states with lot of history and with lot of ruins. Yeah, a cult of ruins. This period is also called a cult of ruins. And so then the African countries, Latin American countries, states, countries of the southern part of this world begin to raise questions. And that's very interesting in this whole history of this discourse. And they begin to say that, you know, this is a very Eurocentric convention. It's a very Eurocentric. We don't have, you know, buildings. We don't have monuments. We have our own oral traditions. Word is oral, yeah? We have our own traditions. We have our songs, and, you know, our development is completely tied up to our oral culture, oral tradition. There's no word as heritage even yet. You know, you've got to include that. In 1992, there is a change in the convention, and a new category comes up, which is called cultural landscapes. And I'm narrating this history because as students of folklore, you must be aware that where folklore is reached in terms of this whole politics of identification, categorization, taxonomies, and how the global citizens should define their culture. And why it was very important for states to palla jhado from, you know, folklore, that they don't want folklore. And I'll come to that also. But that didn't satisfy anybody. And so finally, after a long, this thing in 1989, recommendations on safeguarding of folklore and traditional cultures happened. Interestingly, the same people who defended that they have these oral traditions and that's their strength and that needs protection and safeguarding, the same countries, the southern countries, African countries, Latin American countries, Asian countries, they began to object to the word folklore, who were defending. And the defense was that no, because folklore actually, you know, is seen from a very colonial perspective. We've had histories of colonialism, and we were always looked as backward, our tradition. So it's a very value-loaded term, and it defines us in terms of, you know, people who've been left behind, a culture that's been left behind. So we don't want this term, okay, folklore. They're not satisfied after a while. It is then the efforts that, you know, finally, again, there's a long history and I'm not going to dwell into it, but finally, all these debates lead to the adoption of 2003 Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage. 2005 comes also a convention on cultural diversity, which is interestingly focuses more on creative industry, crafts, individual art practices, belonging to more to the contemporary. Yeah, so there's a word contemporary, which then would presume that folklore was not contemporary. and the need for two different conventions would say somewhere in the mind, the intangible culture was that still that idea of a folklore that is frozen in time, which is very different from how folklore scholarship was actually looking at itself, looking and critiquing itself. It is also the period when the rise of this whole folklore and intangible culture is happening in UNESCO. One of the largest, most powerful voices, the United States, in the domain of folklore in the 90s, when it's at its peak, the folklore studies begins to question its discipline. Yeah. So this discipline is being questioned by folklorists themselves because they want to have a very self-reflexive kind of contemplations, examination of their own methodologies, frameworks, paradigm, and studies of folklore. And finally, because of the American scholarship, first paradigm shift happens when folklore is seen within its socio-cultural political context. Yeah. First time it is looked as a discourse that is created. Okay. The focus shifts from the song per se, the structure of the song, to the performance. You're all going to debate that and discuss that. And then the context of the performance, and then begins the whole thing about that it is not a naturally, culturally given thing. It is very much decided by the politics, by the cultural, historical context of that community. So it becomes more and more interpretative, more and more self-reflective, this speed. But its pitfall is that the scholars in US who are doing these studies and bringing them to India and to rest of the world, opening wonderful Indiana University Center in Pennsylvania and so many of them, also UK, for example. They kind of say that no, folklore and folklore studies do not respond to the contemporary. So there's also political debate around what is contemporary. So one way folklore studies have made such a development, there is such a paradigm shift, but there is this whole questioning about. And it is happening parallelly with folklore gradually becoming heritage, yeah, intangible cultural heritage. Now, I'm taking a break from this to bring your attention that folklore has two words, yeah. One is folk and one is lore, okay? And of course, scholars have tried to give definitions. There's no neat definition. They are very messy. And the debates continued to about who is folk, who is not folk, coming to Dundas's famous thing that even two people together create a folk, yeah? But what I want to specify here is that folk is not just a historically frozen, left behind entity. Folk is present. Folk is contemporary. And folk doesn't at some level of time, stop creating. So what they are creating, what they are singing is not the relics of the past, but is an expression of their contemporary, very much contemporary issues. And that is why a folk song changes from a wedding song or a labor song. It has the capacity to question, and your whole Gadar party, it has the ability to question the powers that be, whether as great as colonial or as geographically close as, say, a landlord. Okay. Intangible heritage, yeah, has communities, it says, and it takes great pride that, folk is something which is negatively valued, it's politically value loaded. So the term folk gets changed by community. What is a community? Does it have any kind of social reality attached to it? Is community a sociological term? Is it an anthropological term? What is community? So community is when all the blood is taken out of that rebel folk, that we come up with something called community, which is very amorphous. Folk is also amorphous. But folk is subaltern because it is against something. It has an other to refer to. Yeah, it has the power against which the folk is standing. Against or pro or whatever, but at least there are two units of defining here. What is a community? It's just a definition itself. It's just the people. Yeah, we may say later while we are contemplating, no, there are so many communities. There's gender community, there is transgender community, there is rural community, there is falana. But community by itself, unless it is qualified, but the folklore discourse had established folk through its multiple, maybe very not, maybe deficient, whatever, terminologies and definitions, description, but folk represented the other, the subaltern. Community has no other. So community by its very nature is then devoid of that creativity, of act, of that tension, that passion, that rebellion, okay, which leads to folklore being not an abstract, folk being not an abstract, but folklore being a social reality, a cultural reality. It is not imagined, like imagined communities. Okay, so that is what we lost in the process. Then let's come to heritage. What is a heritage? When does a song become heritage? When does a dance become heritage? Is a question that we also need to discover. I will give you a very interesting story from the Northeast. I'm very fond of this story. And it was documented by an very famous anthropologist, B.K. Roy Burman. It came up, in the 90s itself in the ISC journal, which said indigenous vision. And though it was actually looking at ecologies and environment, I will, briefly narrate the story to you, very briefly. And then we will come back to this whole thing of what is folklore, what is heritage, what is community, blah, blah, blah. So in the Northeast, you have a community, Naga community, which are called Rongmai Nagas, okay? And they have a story about a cultural hero called Gairam Nong, okay? Gairam Nong. Now, who is Gairam Nong? He is the son of the mortal mother and the Almighty Lord, okay? The great Lord. But after his birth, the father abandons, goes back to his heavenly abode, and he forgets about the mother and the son or whatever, takes no care of them. So when Geramnong, he grows up, he decides to go and question his father, okay, who's the Lord. So look at the power of this story. He's the Lord of the universe. He rules over everyone. Who is this mortal, even if he's son of God, okay, to come and question his authority? I'm now being looked here in two spaces. Why is that so? I can see myself, all of you, in two spaces.
To intervene, Kala Dasari.
Hmm.
The person mistakenly shared
It's
this.
fine now. It's fine now.
Sorry.
So he is enraged. The Lord of the universe is enraged, and he says that, my servants will kill you. You will die. I give you death. Like, the sermons are given to folklore. You are dead. The famous folklorist now who's left folklore, is also left heritage studies, is into performance studies. Barbara Christian Gimlet. If you've not read her, go back and read her. And especially her article, which denounces folklore in favor of intangible. And in the same folklore, American Folklore Society, which was created in, I think, 1888, and 100 years hence in 1998, the validity of folklore is completely denied. Its existence is denied. She says, oh, folklore is not discovered, folklore is made. So folklore is actually an imagination, an abstraction, a concept, a category that the folklorists have created. Okay. So song is not discovered, but song is called folklore because you chose to call it folklore. Some reality out there maybe, but to completely deny that this subject matter, that this whole domain of creative expression exists and existed before any naming, before any folklorist came into, but heritage didn't exist. Okay, people didn't say, oh, this is my heritage. If they didn't say it's my folklore, they said it's my song. So coming back to heritage, she actually turned the tables, and which had a lot of influence on determining all this. The UNESCO had already kind of, declared its allegiance to heritage. So this whole heritage study coming up actually was also of great benefit to the nation states who had to govern this unruly masses of their nation. So, well, good, they just communities. Huh? And that is why in the first pieces of folklore, oral tradition that go into the list, which was at that time called, initially it was called Masterpieces of Oral and Intangible Heritage of Humanity, which was disbanded later, and then this convention came in 2003. So let's take the example of India. What were we sending? We were sending Ram Leela, we were sending Vedic chanting, okay, we were sending Veena, okay, we sent all kind of the Kudiyattam too. Now, Kudiyattam, whether it is a folk or whether it is classical, it's a big debate going on. And because of this, now already that, Shastriya, that they also want to become Shastri. They don't want to be folk anymore. And maybe they never were a folk. I really don't know. But it was identified as a folk tradition at some point of time. So we send these, and then comes the representative list, and one feels liberated at that point. The folklorists feel liberated that now, these marginalized traditions, and no matter how much we say we don't have great tradition, we don't have what little tradition, it's all Eurocentric, it's all colonial way of looking at it. The way the built heritage, even giving just one example, even in the contemporary discourse, is given priority in terms of funds that will go, the protection that will go, the celebration that happens when a heritage city is adopted, is come onto the list. You have how many intangible heritage nominations inscripted? Who even knows about it? There are no brochures, no leaflets, no celebrations. And what have we done? After that list, has anybody benefited? Hampi, at least, tourism and sustainable, all different kind of discourses, put it at the center. But who talks about any of the intangible nominations that people don't even know? The government has no funds for its protection and safeguarding. So this whole idea of the global regime giving recognition to people like us and their culture, that they're going to make it as a world. And we are happy just to be on that list. So this whole discourse of heritage has ended up giving us what? One list, which is worthless, which is useless. Okay? But it is very empowering to the nation state to be seen as people with that long history, long traditions, which was also when we were dealing with folklore. So in one way, this journey from folklore to intangible heritage is also circular. So when I want to now explain to you the difference that through this story about what is folklore in it and when does it become a heritage, okay? So now, but father is a father, then he's also benign as a nation state. He says, after all, you're my son. And so, you make friends with all your other brothers and sisters. Who are these brothers and sisters? They are birds, they are rivers, they are mountains, there are tigers, there are jackals. Okay, the whole world of flora, trees, rivers, that world of flora and fauna is our brothers and sisters of the human. So that's another message that is coming from that father. After that, the hero Geram Nong comes back and he is a singer, he has a guitar. So he starts singing, going from valley to valley, mountain to mountain. And he's a wonderful singer. All birds, all rivers, all animals, they all flow towards him. They come towards him, listening to his songs, listening to his guitar. And it's spread all over that land. His songs are spread. So, the time comes and this great lord's minions, servants come to kill. Now, when they come to kill, the world is shocked. Yeah, this whole landscape is shocked. The birds start crying. The lions and the tigers begin to roar. The floods happen in the rivers and warning the hero that, they have come to kill you. And Germonk says, don't worry. Okay? They cannot kill me, and I'm not afraid of death. Let them do what they want to do to me. And here I would like to read. And so even the rocks roared their warning. The tigers rushed to protect the brother. The birds started crying, but Geram Nong smiled them to a halt. The sun brought out his guitar and sang a song of the deathless cosmos. Okay. Geram Nong had given a death blow to death, though his head was sphered, but his song turned into a soundless muse of the cosmos. Yeah, and that's how he won over death. So even today, and he turned into a mountain. Yeah, so it's also a place legend. I mean, folklore, you'll define it, and I think, yeah, he's warning you that you better be careful. I'm ending my talk here. And just 2-3 lines more. So people go to this mountain, under its mountain, they sing songs, they create new songs, they perform rituals, they have a celebration, a festival, and the process continues. So this is what the communities do. So their cultural practices, their expressions for themselves. They're not singing for Himanshi, Tyagi, or they're not singing for me. This is not for an alien gaze. It is not for a tourist gaze. It is the very expression of their ways of life. Yeah. So this is the realm of folklore. Now, suppose I, as a heritage manager, discover this and I say that it's such a wonderful heritage. It must go on to the world heritage. It will never go. Ramayana will go, this will not go. But I may see a potential in bringing tourism. So remember, heritage, Benham said that where heritage starts, tradition ends. Okay? So when I am bringing others to witness the other, okay? So this gaze, the alien gaze, the global gaze, the tourist gaze, even the nation state's gaze, I would say, is what then brings this paradigm shift from there, this living cultural expression of the people becomes a heritage. Becoming a heritage is, what will I do? I'll create a spectacle. I'll get a person to sing this tale. I will give him some money for his performance. The rest will go to the state revenue. So this has become a commodified cultural activity belonging to the state and not to the people. Yeah. For whom it was just a song, a story that celebrated their life, their landscape, their relationship with the world around them, of animals, birds, rivers, other people, this brotherhood. Intangible heritage has none of this. And all that it has is a list. So you, as a folklorist who are celebrating the Folklore Day and looking at global discourses, that is your primary concern of this conference, must remember the powers that tell you what is folklore, what is heritage. And India is lucky, and South India is particularly lucky that it has kept the folklore studies flag going high. And I wish you very best. And the folklorists must take this flag forward.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And I really thank you so much, because you have taken up something which is very crucial. And with that Rongmai Naga story, you have really brought in the core and the Akam. But Raghavan Painad, now Raghavan Painad is also bringing this issue of, what is there in a name, but there is many things in the name. That's what so he's trying to rebuild the Malayalam Kerala folklore by bringing a word called Akam. So I'm thinking from your story of that, the hero story of the intangible heritage core in the songs, community, its ephemerality, etc., 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 and which will definitely upheld the folklore. And I really definitely take, you are absolutely sure that in sometimes we lost our connectivity with the Russian academia, who really made the impact of folklore, especially in Malayalam and all South India, because those days, when we were young and children, we used to get first affiliated with the fairy tales from the Russia in our own
I
locality.
remember,
So,
yeah.
that was the Raduga publishers, and it was the bigger
Yes, yes, yes.
impact.
And
And,
People's Publishing House.
yeah,
PPH.
you are absolutely correct. But the US Band and Ford Foundation and all will make us undermine that particular kind of a thing. So I still remembering, this Georgian director's film. What is his name? Paranjino. Paranjino.
Mhm.
So it's still how much folklore gets into their life and how much community gets relevantly mentioned. Absolutely, by questioning Barbara Krishnberg Gimblet and its her academic shifts and all, I really loved it. So thank you so much for giving us a wonderful morning to begin with. And I think I'm giving to Himanshi. We may take one question because we
Yes, sure. And before one question, I just want to say one line that folklore and folk is subversive. Intangible cultural heritage is an industry, it's the creation of an industry. So, by its very nature, is subservient. So, we must.
absolutely.
Yeah, Himanshi.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your wonderful speech on Folklore Day, where we are able to distinguish between what actually matters, like the folklore matter, held and is safeguarded within the nomenclature of the word itself and the politics around it. That how the word heritage has brought in the commodification and the material force of politics, which binds folklore matters, which bind things that belong to people into a market, which again is very liable for its, liable not just for the study, like how it is happening, but also liable to something which we might not want to study further as well. And so I open this house for presentations ahead, and if we have questions for from the audience for ma'am, we can have those shortly right now. So before we start with our presentations, we can directly go for the panel discussion. I would like you to, I would request you to please stay until we reach our discussion. If you have time, please, if you can extend that.
I have to, unfortunately, I had told you that I have to leave because I have this commitment